Nushu is an ancient language that was developed and used exclusively by women in southern China. Through songs, poetry, and other art forms, women secretly communicated with each other, swapping stories and sharing their struggles. This once clandestine language is now seeing a resurgence. I speak to Violet Feng, director of a documentary about the women trying to bring Nushu into modern times.
这是我的村庄。几百年前，这里的女人被裹小脚，足不能出户。为了给彼此活下去的希望，她们创造了一种男人看不懂的文字，叫做女书。
Feng is an award-winning journalist and filmmaker based in New York City. She has a distinguished resume. She's directed, produced, and executive produced 13 films, with much of her work focusing on women's rights and societal changes in China. Feng's documentary, Hidden Letters, follows two millennial women in China trying to bring back the secret, woman-only language of Nushu.
One of the reasons I'm making this film is there's tremendous gap in between of men and women of how we see each other in terms of our gender expectations, in terms of our gender stereotypes, you know, and I felt like as a woman, I very much is trapped a lot of times in this patriarchal mindset growing up. And I'm sure that men are trapped in the same kind of like mindset as well. And it's not anybody's fault, but as a filmmaker, I think the most important thing is to connect to people. You know, like, so that's so important of making a film when actually, possibly, men can be the antagonist of the film, not the protagonist, but how do we include them into the conversation so that at the end of the day, I mean, my goal is really that, you know, we can have a conversation and there's some place that we can start to really bridge that gap of understanding. And that's why it's so crucial to bring men into the conversation, because I mean, exactly as much as this film is targeting women audience, female audience, but you know, it's very much targeting male audience as well.
The modern story that Feng tells has roots in a much older time, with themes that still resonate today.
Hidden Letters is a story that started about 400 years ago in feudal society when women had bound feet locked in the chamber room, deprived rights of education in China. In this secluded village in central China, there's a group of women who decided that they are going to create their own language. By sharing poems and songs to give each other hope and dignity, they actually created a very intentional space of sisterhood. With that sisterhood, they built power and strength from within. And this language, together with the culture of the sisterhood, carried on from generation to generation. So my film is really using the language as a lens to look at contemporary women's experiences in China through my two millennial generation female characters in the film, and how they are, while trying to revive this language, is using this language as a legacy to navigate their life, both personal life and professional lives, in the still kind of male-dominant society. But at the same time, the language itself is being co-opted by commercialization. So how does the language survive in all of that, and how does women find their own gender identity for the youngest generation?
And the words that come out so many years ago, and then they're on fans, and they're relayed to one another in kind of a surreptitious way, in a sense. They're just so powerful, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that, you know, to me, what amazes me of this language is, you know, thinking about what this world has done in terms of, you know, what has been moved forward with the women's rights movement, you know, especially over the past, you know, 70 years. But, you know, thinking about hundreds of years ago in these villages when it was under the feudal society, women are on the bottom of the society. And to me, what their approach is, of course, they cannot throw away the entire feudal system, which is completely patriarchal. But what they did is that they turned that into themselves internally by being able to create a safe space by allowing themselves to share their suppression and sufferings. And with that, they come all together and find dignity and pride and build their power from within. And in the end, they did change the narrative because, like in English, we call, men with, wisdom and knowledge, gentlemen. But for those women, even back then, who practice this secret language, they are called gentlewomen. So even by men. So you can see that they are gaining more respect by the community as a whole. And that to me is so powerful. And I think that's very much the legacy of Nushu to me, that, what are the patriarchal mindset that we still actually have, and how much does it that we have to unroot in order to change the narrative. And that's what those women did. And I think that we very much need it today as well.
When did you first become aware of this and the germ of the idea of making a film out of it?
So I started to know about Nushu years ago by reading a book written by Lisa C. called Snowflower and the Secret Fan. It's a novel, brilliant novel based on the secret language. And I remember reading it and feeling really blown away, first of all, that how come as a Chinese woman born and raised in China, I knew nothing about this. But also I remember feeling, a sense of shame that I didn't know about this as well. But it was really until I think years later that I moved back to China and I got married and had a child, that all of a sudden I realized as a woman living in today's world how many roles that we have to fulfill in order to juggle between the impossibles, as a wife, as a daughter-in-law, as a mother. Also for me as a female filmmaker dealing with an industry that's also, dominated by men mostly. But of course, I don't want to just make an activism film about women's rights. It's just not that interesting to me. So when my two producers came to me of making a film about Nushu, the secret language, my instant reaction is that if there's any way I can tie that historical story with contemporary women's experiences, then that's a film I want to make.
Feng has made films about China for the past 20 years in the hopes that they can make a real difference in communities. Her 2015 documentary, Please Remember Me, follows an elderly couple as they confront the realities of living with dementia. The film helped destigmatize Alzheimer's and similar brain diseases in China.
I think when you make films, you hope to create change, don't you? I mean, how
Of course.
important is that to you?
That's why that we make documentary films. Otherwise I would be making fiction, I would be making commercial content. For me, that there is a way of why we live in this world. And for me, just to do something for myself, to fulfill myself, I don't think that's satisfying enough. We believe that, the meaning and value of a human being is our interaction with the world and what we can contribute to the world, what we can leave for the world, for our next generation. And for me, that's a perfect combination of, involving creativity and also do something meaningful. So I don't have midlife crisis. My husband doesn't either. So it's it's a great life.
When I watch films, I watch them like any other viewer, and then I sort of watch them as like, wow, I'm really interested in how they constructed this film. And what hit me with yours, it starts with words on a screen, and basically, I'm going to paraphrase. These women were born to obey men, forbidden to read and write. Their voices were silenced. Most left no record of their lives. And I think you're telegraphing to the viewer, this is really an important story, because these are like records, like there aren't that many of them. It tells an amazing story. And it also says to me, as a filmmaker, I'm telling an important story. That's an awesome responsibility, and how you construct it and how you tell the story and how you share these stories is so important. I mean, can you talk about that responsibility and creating this film? And, not that it's a burden, but it's a responsibility to tell this amazing story.
I think being a filmmaker, that kind of responsibility, especially a documentary filmmaker, stay with you, especially in the process of crafting a film from all different kind of, elements. One of that is because we actually make film about real people, the responsibility of us carry about our subjects, of the stories that they show to us, and to keep also dignity of their stories, and not only taking part of their stories, but kind of like look at their stories holistically. And I think that's part of it. And also I think as a filmmaker, at the end of the day, this is my film. So I'm the author and it provides my perspective, but who is holding me accountable of my perspective? So that as a journalist, trained journalist, and I think that's so important that, when I make a film, I think I need to provide a perspective that's needed by the society, and that's needed in a way that it's also like it hasn't been really shared that much of that perspective, and then it shows the urgency and the stake of why that story needs to be told. And all of that, I think, as independent filmmakers, we don't work in an organization that we have editorial team to check all of that. So those are all on us.
In Hidden Letters, viewers follow the two main characters as they navigate being independent women in modern China while still facing barriers because of their gender.
How do you find the right characters, and are you, because you don't really kind of, when you start, you don't know where the story finishes in a sense.
I don't, but I do have a concept, and then these are, sort of like, I think what guided me of making any film, especially documentary film, is not that I have answers, it's more about what are the questions that's guiding me through. And for me, is like to understand what are the elements that contributed to us being women, still feeling suppressed in certain ways, and why is that, and what are we dealing with. But for me, my casting pool is very small, because like nationally was only like 7 certified Nushu practitioners in the country, and Hu Xin is the youngest one, and she's the spokesperson, the face of Nushu. So of course I was really interested to meet her, but it was until that I knew that she was going through a transition in her marriage and in her life that I start to know that from that point on, she is, her life is going to be different, and she's going to have a different relationship with Nushu. And that's the moment that I knew that I'm gonna follow her, and then just to see what her journey is of her transformation. I don't know how that's going to change. I didn't know that the journey, the transformation of her actually was resulted from this beautiful, sisterhood that she had with the last living master. I didn't know that, but I was so grateful that they have such a beautiful bond, and then really get her to land in a different place in her life in the end. And I also knew that I wanted to cast, if I have 2 characters, I wanted to cast somebody from the rural area, and also wanted to cast another woman from the urban settings, because for women, our challenges and struggles and pressures that we're dealing with as women from rural and urban settings are very different.
Well, let me ask about men in general, because we get the one thing that comes across is just how important these words are and how the women connect with it. But then you hear guys saying, well, it's too small, make it bigger. Or you hear like there's a meeting and he's saying, well, we could have Nushu potatoes. And they're like, it's like, the woman's being so respectful, and then he's saying, but she counters, and then he says, well, I'm not saying like Nushu razors or anything. They don't even get it.
Well, that's where the gap is, isn't it? And I think that, not only Nushu provided us a way to look into the resilience and the strengths of women, but also it provided me a window to really see through these commercialized scenes of what men are seeing of Nushu. To me, their reaction to Nushu is more of their reaction to women still today. And that's where the gap that we're seeing. So I think that it's super important for me to have these scenes, because, like if we don't have the camera there, this will be our everyday life encountering, men and this will be, why that I think we're still feeling that kind of pressure as women, right? Because there's this societal kind of still like mindset of where a man is supposed to be, where a woman is supposed to be. So like for me to use these things to really show where the gap is and how do we really engage a conversation? Because I think that when you have a camera there, which is so interesting, because the camera created, sometimes the camera is a space for intimacy that it actually draw you so close to the characters. Sometimes the camera actually created space and distance. Like if for example, I don't have the camera there, I am in those scenes, I probably be feeling that this is very normal because that's my everyday life. But if you have the camera there, I think it pushes us to reflect whether this is right or not for both men and women.
This is obviously a story in China, but I think you can drop this story
Absolutely.
in the US, you can drop this anywhere in the world. I mean, we see a lot of the same elements in every society. So take me to a theater in the United States and China, around the world, the film, the closing credits come up and you're able to be there listening to the audience as they discuss, because everybody discusses a film as they exit the theater. What are some of the conversations you want to hear? What are some of the conversations you expect to hear?
When I made this film, I knew that it's a story that happened in China, but I made this film with an idea that I wanted to connect with a global audience because women's experiences, especially our internal struggle, is so universal. And, it has so much to do with, I felt how capitalism even plays a role in like jeopardizing the gender equality in many societies. So so for me to show the film around the country here and also, in other countries in Europe and in Australia, I was always curious that whether people can really connect and resonate with the film. And again, it proven that everybody was so resonating. And I've been showing this film many times in even the Midwest in the US. And these are the people I really wanted to connect because I felt like they don't really, besides hearing the mainstream media about what they talk about China, they don't really have a chance to know, to get connected to the real people, the real stories of China. And so I was really curious to know how they can react to it. And I have so many women who came to me. You think it's any different here?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.